sun was coming up. We were all exhausted. I was mad as all get go and frustrated because these guys just they weren't showing themselves very well. And when we did see them, we didn't have much of an opportunity. There was one point where well, I won't get into that, but I get on top of my vehicle. I'm mad. I'm upset. I get on top of my vehicle. I take all my armor off. I take my plates off. I take my helmet off. I throw my helmet down on the ground, and I'm like, man, this stinking war. And I'm like, showing myself to him, right? And so I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna lay down. I'm gonna lay down here, and I'm gonna take a freaking nap. I'm freaking tired. I'm exhausted, and I laid down. And it was as soon as I laid down and I closed my eyes for a second, and I didn't have any intention on falling asleep, but I was exhausted. I laid down in my vehicle, closed my eyes, and as soon as I did, I heard ping up against my vehicle, and I look over, and there's a grenade rolling off into the canal, and I'm like, what? Boom! And it blows up, and I'm like, oh my gosh! And I jump up and I throw my calculator on, and I hear bing again, and I look over, and it's another grenade. They keep chunking these grenades at me, trying to get them on top of my vehicle into my turret to blow me up. But
Hey guys, you were just able to listen to one of the many experiences that we go over during this video. If you could take some time and to continue to listen and subscribe, that would be great. We're gonna go back now to when Luke was first kind of a kid, deciding to join the military. You're gonna hear experiences when he joined the military and some of the PTSD post-military things that he had to go through. So please stick around, listen to the whole video. This should help anyone that is thinking about joining the military. If you have family in the military, if your mom or dad or brother or sisters in the military and you want to help them, this would be a good way to listen and understand the things that they went through. Stay tuned. Let's go. All right, welcome to another podcast of Reviving the American Family. I'm your host, Zach, and today we do have a special guest, Luke. Luke, if you want to shortly introduce yourself, that would be great.
yeah, hey, I appreciate you having me on, Zach. I'm really excited about this podcast and getting on here with you and chatting a little bit about my history. We live here in Birmingham, Alabama right now. I have a couple kids that go to the University of Alabama, and right now I'm just enjoying retired life.
Awesome. Well, we wanted to bring Luke on, and he is a retired veteran. What branch, Luke?
The United States Army. All the other ones are just twigs.
Oh, well, hopefully no one takes offense to that for our Marines and everyone else that will argue with Luke. But put it in the comments. Before we start, we want to get this message out. I wanted to have Luke on because he's a combat veteran that served our country, has kind of had the cycle of serving, the after-war effects of PTSD and some of those other things that we'll jump into. The main purpose for me is I look at this, we're reviving the American family, and there's a lot of families out there that have to deal with their sons or daughters going overseas, fighting, and then coming back, and what that looks like. So if we can help any families out there, that is the purpose of this, and Luke's going to share some interesting stories with us and kind of take us through his story. Everybody has their story, and I think everybody probably deals with certain things in different ways, but this is Luke's story, and I think it's an important one to learn from, to listen to, and to be able to kind of get it out there to the ethers here. So we appreciate you sharing it with us, Luke.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me on, and I'm super excited about being able to help in any way that I can by sharing my story and I definitely have a lot of compassion for those families that are going through the military life right now. And we're thinking about it in the future. Absolutely.
Absolutely. So I first wanted to start because there's a lot of young people that are joining the military right now, and I wanted to kind of take a step back before we go into your career and where you got boots on the ground type of thing. I want to take a step back and who was Luke? As a kid, as a teenager, I know Luke, just so you guys know, through church. So to me, Luke's a church-going man, but I think there's a little bit more to that story that I'd like to get into here. And obviously, I know him as a veteran and a hero in my eyes, of course. So, But let's take a step back and tell us, Luke, tell us a little bit about your family life growing up and just your situation. I think you had told me before you grew up in Texas. Is that right?
No, so I was born in Texas. Early on, my mom and my biological father, they split up. So about 2 years old, when I was about two, we moved up to Arkansas.
Okay.
And so I originally come from Arkansas. I claim Arkansas in most cases, when it benefits me, which isn't very often, but I do claim Arkansas.
And hey,
I love
I
Arkansas.
lived in Arkansas for 5 years. That's how me and Luke met at church in Arkansas. But I
That's
love
right.
Arkansas. It's beautiful. It gets kind of a bad rap, bad name, but there's not too many other states that I've been to, and I've lived in multiple states that I would say was every state I've well, Utah is beautiful, but I would say
Utah's very good.
Arkansas is right there.
Absolutely. So, we're going to be talking about the military. Funny thing is, Arkansas per capita has more retired military veterans than I think just about any other state. I think Florida might be starting to compete, or they might have already surpassed them. But when I was a kid, it was certainly the case that retired military they had the highest rate of retired military per capita in the state of Arkansas. And my grandpa was a Vietnam vet, and so my mom moved us back to my grandma and grandpa, who was a Vietnam vet. So
Okay.
yeah.
So you grew up in the Arkansas, is it the Fort Smith area? Is it around there?
So where I grew up was in southern Arkansas. I grew up south of a little town called Mina. I actually lived in a town where the population was called Vandervoort. And the population was 98. So we moved from
So when
Houston,
people think of
Texas.
Arkansas, that's the place you actually live, is what you're telling me. Because
That,
I've
that's
driven
where
through
I
those
live.
places.
Yeah. Yeah, that's where you meet a husband and a wife, and there's a very high probability they're cousins.
They come from the
So
same tree, huh? Okay.
they come from the same tree.
All
Yeah.
right. So tell me a little bit
So
more. So you grew up in that area. Good kid,
did
wild kid, lost kid.
so
Did you go to
so
church?
as a,
Those types of things.
so as a young kid, I was a good kid. I was definitely a country boy early on. Uh, my mom eventually ended up marrying somebody else, and he's my dad. He's my father for all intents and purposes. He passed away in 2018, but for all intents and purposes, he's my dad. Just a wonderful Arkansas, good old country boy also. So I was raised up in the woods. I've been hunting since I was 5 years old. Um, my all my grandpas. I had the privilege of having three grandpas and three grandmas. All my grandparents were military, and so like I said, my grandpa that was a Vietnam vet on my mom's side. He was in Vietnam in 68, 69 during the Tet Offensive, and so obviously I looked up to him. I just thought he was the greatest thing out there. And then my stepdad, my dad, his grandma or his mom and dad were both in the Air Force or Army Air Corps at the time. It was before it was Air Force. It was just a kind of a branch of the Army. And so they were both in the Army Air Corps, and my grandma and grandpa, that's how they met. She was an E6, he was an E5. She actually outranked him. And so I always thought that was a cool story. And then my grandpa in Texas, he was a Korean vet, and he was in the Navy.
Okay.
And so here I am as a kid. I'm an outdoorsman. I loved going out into the woods, hunting, shooting from an early age. Just being the country boy, right? Getting dirty, getting my knees dirty, getting yelled at. It's time for supper. Come on in.
Right.
And that's the kind of young man I was right up until about my teens. And then once I got to my teens, everything kind of shifted a little bit. We moved from southern Arkansas up to the Fort Smith area, and when I was 13, I was going to a junior high school called Ramsey High School. It was Ramsey High School or junior high school at the time, and I was a little bit of a troublemaker, and I got into some trouble while I was in high school, and actually ended up getting arrested and had to go to court. before I went to court and get my punishment. I pleaded guilty, obviously. Before that, my mom decided it was time for me to start going to church.
Okay.
And the cool thing about our church was is it had Boy Scouts. And so I started to get involved with Boy Scouts at the age of 14. I was very involved with Boy Scouts, very involved with my local community, if you will. And when I went to court, the judge was what I was looking at basically was 2 years in a juvenile penitentiary, basically.
Oh wow.
And the prosecuting attorney that came in just so happened to be my Boy Scout leader. And we had no idea. My first name is Robert. On the docket, it said Robert Luke Kierton, and he just didn't put two and two together. And he came and sat down next to me, and he was like, "I'm going to get you out of this." And so
That's a good
he went to the.
prosecutor to have, huh?
It was wonderful.
But
My sentence was literally to be involved with Boy Scouts until I turned 18 years old, and
that's
that's exactly what I did.
that's
And
awesome. It's
so
interesting.
that's what.
You look back and you see these miracles, and I'm assuming you look at that and say, "Wow, what my life would have been totally different if I had to have a felony that walked behind me my entire life."
I can't imagine. I can't imagine. So I did have a felony on my record until I was 18. It was expunged when I was 18 years old, and that was crushing for me because my grandparents did explain to me enough. We're a military family. Did explain to me enough that if you have a felony on your record, you're not getting into the military. You're just not at the
Yeah.
time. I don't know if they've done waivers with that or what. And I was crushed, and but going to court, going to church, having a faith that I leaned on, having good young men's leaders and Boy Scout leaders, that made the difference for me, and that really changed the trajectory of my life
That's great.
and where I was headed. Yeah.
So from 14, 8 to, from the time that occurred to throughout high school, everything kind of was pretty good. When did you, or do you have anything you want to add to that?
No, no, no. So the cool thing about the Boy Scouts was it was right in line with what I had always known that I was going to do, which was join the military. I knew since I could talk that I was going to join the military.
Okay.
That's just the way it was. I was going to follow my grandpa's footsteps. And the Boy Scouts was right in line with that, right? I mean, here you're going on outdoor activities. I'm homeschooled. My mom pulled me out of school and I was homeschooled and I graduated from homeschooling. And so I was very involved with Boy Scouts, and it kept my mind busy and kept me in the outdoors right where I needed to be. But I was also able to gain a good education besides the academic education, the outdoor big boy education,
Yeah.
if you will.
Yeah. So, okay. So was your grandpa and grandma, were they both in the Air Force? Is that what you said before?
Yeah, so on my dad's side, my grandma and grandpa were in the Army Air Corps,
Okay.
and which was the Air Force back in the 40s.
Okay.
It eventually attained the name the Air Force. My grandpa, when he retired, it was the Air Force. He retired out in E8, but yeah, my grandma and grandpa both. Yeah, they were in the Air Force.
So did that play a decision on you going into the Army? Because back then it was the Army, or how did you make that decision to like, which one am I actually going to go into? Because you just
So
bragged about the Army, so I know you love them now, but how did you decide before?
so the story is kind of interesting. I, I had tons of respect for my grandpa who was in the Army. He was a Vietnam vet on my mom's side. He never talked about it. Um, and to me, that just created this cloud of mystique, right? Like, oh man, you were definitely my hero. Like, even when you're not talking about it, it makes it that much cooler.
Yeah.
But then I also had uncles that were one fought in Korea and he was shot by a sniper. He survived, and he would tell that story every once in a while. And then my other uncle, he fought with Merrill's Marauders in Burma, India, and these are all Army guys. and he fought with Merrill's Marauders in Burma, India. Matter of fact, he was the oldest living Ranger that never went to basic training.
Okay.
And he took a frigate over to Burma, India. Merrill's Marauders came through and recruited him,
Wow.
and so he joined them. But no, so I pull up to the recruiting station, and in Arkansas, the way the recruiting station is back then, they're not so much like this anymore, but the recruiting station had in line the Navy, the Army, the Marines, and the Air Force. Three different offices that you entered from the outside. And I got out of my car and I had no idea where I was going to go. I knew it was going to be the Army or the Marines, and I was thinking about the Air Force. And I started walking, and I just said a prayer to myself, just got to the right one. And I had all intentions on going into the Marine office, but something pulled me over to the Army office. And I opened up the door to the recruiter, and this short guy, clean cut in his, Class A uniform, is sitting behind his desk, and he looks at me and he's like, "Can I help you?" Almost like I was lost. And I said, "Yes, sir. I'm looking for a career." And he almost fell out of his seat, because they have to meet a quota.
Yeah.
And he was like, "Oh, here we go. Come on, come sit here, let's talk." Yeah.
They brought out the
And
red
that's
carpet
what
for you.
happened.
So
Yeah.
how old were you when you went in?
So I was 19 years old when I went in,
Okay.
and I joined the army. Yeah. So I was 19 years old.
Did
Um,
you graduate at 18? So from like I'm trying to figure out from the time you graduated to what were you doing? Was it a slow decision? Sound
yeah,
like you always
you
knew you
know,
wanted to go in.
and that's actually a really important point. Great question. I graduated when I was 16,
Oh,
and I'm in Arkansas where we live. They have a small university there called it's University of Arkansas Fort Smith. And so I did some classes on and off there from the time I was 16 until I was 19, and I never did well, right? And I always thought that I might not be smart, or that I just wasn't good enough to do the academia. But none of my parents, neither one of my parents had a degree. None of my grandparents had degrees. I'm the first generation to have a degree in my family, and so it was just that's just what it was. I didn't
how do
feel
you
like
graduate at 16 if you're not good at?
I didn't. I graduated at 46.
So
I just graduated this year.
I'm talking about high school.
Oh, oh, okay. Yeah. So with high school, I, I don't know. I didn't feel smart. Even though on paper I could do everything, if I applied myself, if I went to my classes, I made A's. Schooling was easy,
All right,
but I
Luke's being
just
humble. Then he's smart. You can't graduate at 16 and not be smart. Come on.
it's the confidence. It was a confidence issue at the time, and I think kind of I don't know, a mentor issue. I didn't really have any of my family to kind of look after to go to a school. It just wasn't a priority for anybody in my family.
Got it.
So in fact, when I first started college at 16, my dad, he told me, he said we'll pay for a couple of your classes. He was like, however, work comes first. And that's the complete opposite of what we teach our kids. Nothing comes in the way of your education.
Right.
Focus on your education, right? And I did. So I had a full-time job from the time that I was 16. Well, I say full-time. I worked at Brahms, but I worked a good 35, 40 hours a week at this ice cream place. And then I worked there until I was about 17, and I ended up going and working for a lawn mowing company. And I worked with them until I joined the military. Yeah.
Okay.
And so to me, that was always priority. Got to make money. You got to make money.
Yeah. And our generation was taught if you want to make the best money, you go to college, which in my opinion is we can talk about that another time, but not necessarily true.
Right.
You can make money and you don't have to go to college. But anyway,
I agree with you.
not to get sidetracked. But so because we're going to talk about military and PTSD, let me ask you if you don't mind, I'm going to get into HIPAA violation here, but if you don't mind, how was your mental health before you went into the military?
Yeah, so obviously there were some stressors before I joined the military. I mean, it's not normal for a 14-year-old kid to get a felony on his record, right? So there were some life circumstances that were kind of difficult to deal with as a young man. Did I feel like anything was wrong? I felt like I was okay. I felt like I was normal, especially going to church and everything like that. My mental health was good, and I look back at it and evaluate myself now, and I think to myself, yeah, there were definitely some things that could have been corrected with some behavioral therapy, right? Like just going in and talking to somebody, hey, no, that's not right. That's not let's think like this. What if you thought like that? But nothing dramatic or big, right? Like all of us as teenagers go through that awkward stage, those awkward years where we're learning who we are, how do we interact socially, how do we deal with hurt, how do we deal with pain, how do we deal with happiness, and I would say that I handled everything mentally just like any other kid would. So
Okay.
as far as mental problems, no, I didn't have mental problems
Got it.
at the time.
All right. So remind me, you're 19, you're going in. What year is this?
It was in 1999.
99.
Yeah,
So 2 years before 2001. For our younger listeners, 9/11 happened 2001.
that's right. So September 11th, 2001 was when the towers were hit. I joined in 1999, and it was of my own will. I literally walked into that recruiter office completely expecting to serve in the military for 20 years.
And how,
It
so
was just what I
how
wanted
long
to
did
do.
you end up serving, Luke? How many years?
But so I ended up serving 10 years, 5 months, and 22 days.
Okay. Know
Um,
it to the T.
yeah,
So
you'll remember
so
them all.
10 years, 5 months, 22 days.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I was retired out in on April 10th of 2010. So I mean it was 10 and a half months or 10 years and 5 months that I served. And I would probably still be in today. I'd be at my 26-year mark right now. I would probably still be in today, had I stayed in the military.
And you
Had I been able to stay in the military.
So as a 19-year-old, you're going in as enlisted, right? And I don't
Enlisted.
you're gonna have to kind of help me through some of these terms, but enlisted
Yeah.
E1 is what you go in
Yeah. So
as, is that right?
So there's enlisted, there's commissioned, and then there's warrant officer, which
Okay.
is a type of commissioning. And they're just basically specialists. But yeah, so I enlisted into the military as an E1 into the United States Army. Yeah. And so, um,
And
a commission
and you
off
finished as what?
E7.
E7.
So that's a sergeant. Yeah. And that's a sergeant first class. And so really good. I mean, really fast promoting. Well, I was really fast. I was actually the fastest promoted E7 in the Army, and I was promoted to E7 in 2006. So I was in the military right at 7 years when I got promoted. I got promoted
Okay.
the same day as my 7-year anniversary. Yeah.
So you got a promotion pretty much every year
Yeah,
ish.
well, that's the way it's the way that it looks on when we talk about numbers. You have to be time and grade a certain amount of time in order to get promoted to the next rank, right? So like E1, you got to be in the military like 3 months before you can get promoted to E2. So E1 through E4 is automatic. You're going to get promoted if you do really well. Then they can put in a waiver for you to get promoted early. And so I got a waiver to get promoted to E4, and I want to say that was at my 18-month mark. I got promoted
Okay.
to E4.
Okay.
So it took right about a year and a half for me to get E4.
Okay.
Then from there, things take a little bit longer. So you go before a board and you're interviewed basically, and you got to make so many points on this interview in order to get promoted to E5, along with some other some other technical things. And so I got picked up for E5, and that was right after 2011. And yeah, so or 2001. I'm sorry, right after 9/11.
Okay.
And then I got promoted to E6 a couple years after that, and then I got picked up for E7 right after that.
Okay.
So
So how many tours did you do, Luke?
I did 2 deployments to Iraq
Is there a
in support
difference
of.
between tours and deployments?
No, they're the
Okay.
same thing.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so I did 2 tours. I did OIF1, which was from 2003 to 2004. So that was for the initial fall of Baghdad, all the way up into OIF2, which was kind of a transitional phase. And then I did an OIF3, which was 2005 to 2006. So I went 2003 to 4, and then 5 to 6.
OIF. What does that stand for?
OIF is Operation Iraqi Freedom.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So there's 2 campaigns going on, and a lot of times, especially now as the years have gone on, they look at them as kind of the same campaign, the global war on terrorism, right?
Right.
And there's actually 2 major campaigns taking place. One was in Afghanistan and one was in Iraq. Iraq was Operation Iraqi Freedom. Afghanistan was Operation Enduring Freedom.
Gotcha. And so you never were in Afghanistan. You were just in Iraq.
No, I was never in Afghanistan. And in support of Enduring Freedom, I did do a small stint to Egypt, but it was just completely an advising role.
Gotcha.
And so I did that for a short time, and then came back and then deployed straight to Iraq.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. So your first tour that's 2001?
2003.
2003. Yep. Okay. So what's going on? So 2001 it happens, and we're starting the deployment, right, in 2001 or no?
So 2001, we're starting our campaign in Afghanistan.
In Afghanistan.
So the Afghanistan war is going on for about 2 years at this point in time, and it's not.
For us that remember this, it was for not in the military, it's also blended for us. It's like Afghanistan, Iraq, and
right.
Obviously they're 2 different countries, but it all happened at the same time, and so
exactly.
it's a little blended. At least in my brain, it is.
So I don't want to take anything whatsoever away from my Afghanistan brother and sisters. Right? I was in Iraq at the absolute worst time, and during that time period, I would have rather been in Afghanistan. But later on, you start talking 2007, 2008 on, I would have not wanted to be anywhere near Afghanistan. Afghanistan was kind of like the special warfare type of fighting early on, and then later on, you these guys at like 101st and the 82nd. I mean, our Marine brothers, the fighting that they had to endure in Afghanistan was just, man, it was some of the toughest. So the difference, and one way I like to compare Iraq versus Afghanistan is in Iraq, we had a lot of IEDs, improvised explosive devices, right? Like roadside bombs. And then they moved on from just doing roadside bombs to what we call complex ambushes, which is where you would hit a roadside bomb and then they would ambush you with a small arms fire.
So they were waiting.
And these guys
were waiting for one of the vehicles to run over it, and then they would start firing at you.
Well, they would wait for it to blow up. They would wait for everybody else to get out of their vehicles to start conducting, to get a medevac in, conducting first aid. And as soon as they started getting out of the vehicles, they'd hit them with RPGs and AK-47s and RPKs. And so that started to happen in about 2004 in Afghanistan. The difference between Iraq and Afghanistan, these guys that were shooting in Iraq were spray and pray. So they would just sit there and they would shoot. Well, what a lot of people don't realize with Afghanistan where these were seasoned warriors. They just got off of a stint with the Soviet Union, right? Mm-hmm. for 12 years. They were in a battle with them or a war with them for 12 years. So these guys were shooters. You know, they could hit you, and they aimed at what they were shooting at. And so when they got into when the enduring freedom vets got into a firefight over in Afghanistan, it was business.
Yeah.
I mean, it was business.
Got it. So let's take a step back. So you were in the military for about 4 years before you did your first tour.
Correct.
Can you take us through, like, what was it like the first time you are in battle? So you've been trained for 4 years. It's all training, but now you have real danger.
Yeah, the very first engagement that I had that I talk about is we were on a route in Ramadi, all right, and this route's called Route Nuggets, and we were driving down Route Nuggets, and these poor insurgents had no clue what they were doing, and we were all in our Humvees. Our Humvees were not up armored at the time, and so their bullets would pierce right through our Humvee, no problem. And we're driving down this route called Route Nuggets, and they are on either side of the road firing up at us. So they're in their own crossfire, shooting at us from both sides. RPGs are going off, and the very first thought that goes into my head is, these guys are idiots, you know. And then training kicks in, right? Like you have that initial thought, you know, and training kicks in, and obviously our flaps were open on our windows, and I just start laying down fire with my M4. So when you get into a situation like that, when you get into ambush, the first rule of engagement is to break contact as soon as you can, right? And so that's exactly what we did. We went through, we broke contact, kind of regrouped, and so I went from that and straight into a room clearing procedure, and it was the first room clearing procedure I'd ever done, and I'd never been trained on.
So you're out of the Humvee and you're in a building. When you say room clearing,
so,
yeah. So
help
me understand.
Yeah, so we're driving down this road. We go basically through this funnel of fire, right? They're shooting at us from both sides, and we drive about 100 meters around a curve to on this road, on this Trout Nuggets, and so we stop, we regroup, we talk about a little bit about what happened over the radio. I mean, our 50 gunners are up on top of the Humvee scanning and everything like that. Talk about what's happening, and a guy comes up to one of our Humvees and says something to our interpreter, and our interpreter said there's two of them in this building over here. Okay. And so we're like, okay, well, let's go clear out the building. Let's go get them out of there. And so and it's a water plant because we're right next to a river that feeds into the Euphrates, and so me and three other guys go and clear this room, and that was my first experience at real combat.
That's intense.
And I'd never you never know how you're going to react in those situations. You got your guys that are like, oh man, I can't wait to go and do this and do that to bad guys, and you know, and I was one of them, right? Like, yeah, man, I can't wait to go and use this training and engage the enemy and this and that.
Yeah, in your mind, you're the GI Joe. You're about my age, so I play with GI Joes. You're like, yeah, I'd be able to do this, but when you got actual bullets flying,
it's different. It hits completely different. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of the whole, you're forged in fire, right? Like that was my being forged at that point in time. And we go into this room, and there's two guys in there, and I'm the number one man, what they would call the number one man. We wouldn't have even known what that was at that point in time. Well, we did, but we just weren't trained in it. Mm-hmm. And I go in there, and he literally comes running
at me. Number one man means you're the first to go in?
I'm the first one in the building.
Okay.
And I go into the building, and sure enough, a guy's standing there, and he turns around and he comes running at me. I don't know why he came running at me, and So I flipped my M4 around. I knew I wasn't going to kill him at that point in time. You're always looking right around the hips. You want to see their hands. You want to make sure that they don't have any kind of weapon on them. He didn't have a weapon on him. Flipped my M4 around and hit him right in the head as hard as I could. And but not knowing what I was doing, when I came into the room, there was a guy standing behind me with a knife, and that's where my number two man, who I'm not going to say his name, but he ended up hitting him and knocking him out as well, and we were able to detain those two guys, and so it was an eye-opening moment, but I was more mad than I was scared or anything. I was just
So
I was
this is
angry.
this is hand-to-hand combat that you're talking about.
Yeah,
I mean,
so I don't like to call it hand-to-hand combat because it is not it's not it's not what you think of when you think of hand-to-hand combat, where these guys are actually having to pull out their boot knives and go toe to toe with some guys. I couldn't imagine. I couldn't imagine having to go through something like that. You hear some of these MACV guys over in Vietnam, some of the stories that they have, and it was nothing like that. And so even though it was very hands-on, I wouldn't call it hand-to-hand combat because at no point in time during that engagement was I fearful of my life, right? You get into a knife to knife with somebody, and somewhere in there you got to think to yourself, what if I slip?
but when you say you're hitting, you're hitting them. Okay,
Hitting them with the butt of my rifle.
to me it's
I broke my rifle.
really okay.
Yeah,
So yeah, so
yeah,
to me, when I think a lot of this, at least in my mind, and some of the YouTube videos that I've been able to see, it's like, they're shooting from afar, but you're in a building in the same room and trying to make all the right decisions, when to use your weapon, when to not use your weapon. That is
right.
just, it's something that someone like me, I couldn't even imagine. I couldn't even imagine.
Yeah. So like I always say, is everything goes back to training, right? Like you train and you train and you train and you practice and you put yourself in the worst situations in these training scenarios. uh, the training scenarios are set up for you to fail,
Mm-hmm.
and so you can operate at your highest capacity while you're in combat. Nobody's going to operate at 100% capacity during combat. Nobody is.
Yeah.
And so in these training scenarios, getting ready for different types of situations, that was definitely the case for those 4 years before getting into combat, was being put in scenarios where we were deemed to fail.
Is 4 years, is that the normal amount of time that people do before they're put into a combat situation, or is there people that go in a year and they're in it?
Yeah, yeah, and that's a great question. There's a guarantee that you'll have basic training in AIT first, right? I was a 13 Fox, so I was a forward observer. I was out with the infantry most of the time. We call ourselves educated infantrymen, just because we have the maps and the cool stuff. And but so you're going to do basic training in AIT first, obviously. Once you're out of AIT, when you get back to your unit, there's a small in processing time, and then you have to get qualified with your unit. So that could take up to 6 months. So you could be in combat as soon as, say within 18 months after you sign that piece of paper at your recruiter's office. You can be in combat in 18 months.
Okay.
So it is not uncommon to see an E2 out there fighting in combat. E1's not as common. If you're fighting next to an E1, he did something wrong and got demoted.
Okay.
So
What about, so how long was your first tour?
my first tour was 12 months.
And your second?
So and my second one was 12 months as well. But
Okay.
I came home early from my second tour, um, and it was a blessing. There was two parts to it. So I was injured on my second tour. Ended up hurting my neck enough that I had to have surgery on it, and my back. I had a pretty good back injury. And so I was gone for 12 months on my first tour. On my second tour, I was gone for, I think it was 8 months. And then, but my son, he had to have spine surgery, and it was a major spine surgery. He was 2 years old, and so I got to go home for his spine surgery. And once I got home, they were like, "Hey, don't worry about coming back out." And this was through talking with my lieutenant colonel at the time, Colonel Price, and he said, "Hey, don't worry about coming home. Stay home with your family, recover, recoup." My unit had taken some pretty good, significant hits, and mentally, I was at that point. I think I was about checked out anyway. I was
Gotcha.
about done.
So when you're doing a tour, are you out in the, I don't know what you call it, the field or the battle or whatever, doing your routine checks and those types of things? Is that a daily thing?
What do you mean by daily checks? Like you
Well,
just
I
your
guess
your everyday?
yeah, when you go back to your base and then do you go out on a route every day to check or a mission? Maybe it's a mission. Do you have a mission every day?
Yeah, so it's different for different units, right? It depends on the unit's overall mission. So there's an overall mission that each unit is assigned, right? On my second tour, we definitely went out every single day on route missions, right? Like we might do what they call route security, and that's basically where we drive out on these different routes and we just make sure the routes are secure. We did a mission for about 3 months where I can't remember the name of the mission, but it was we were guarding what they called rocket boxes. So they had these improvised rockets that they were shooting into Baghdad while they were trying to write their constitution.
Hmm.
And so we would go out there and we would look for these rocket boxes, where basically these hot areas where they knew they were getting improvised rockets from. Um, Military bases have what they call, different types of radar, but they were called Q-36s and Q-37s. They could tell you the flight of a bird. They could tell you the trajectory of a rock. That's how sensitive they were.
Wow.
Well, the Q-37 was. The Q-36 it was a little bit more firm, but the 37 could pick up small arms fire and tell you exactly where it was coming from. But the purpose was to locate where these rockets were. And sometimes when these rockets would get fired, they would do a counter battery mission. In other words, a rocket would get fired, or they would shoot mortars or something like that, and they would give them the grid of where those rockets were fired from, and we would just immediately fire artillery on top of them. But in the higher population areas, we were really worried about collateral damage, and so we weren't allowed to do that. We would get called out there to go to these areas and observe where the rockets were fired from or the mortars.
Got it.
Yeah, so on my second tour, a rotation, a mission would look something like we would prep before the mission, so that would take 45 minutes, and then we would go out on mission for 12 hours where we're just driving these routes, talking to local population, trying to figure out where the bad guys are, try to draw fire, try to get into a fist fight, right? Then we would come home and we would download if we had EPWs or prisoners of war, we would have to take those up to Baghdad. That might be another 2 or 3 hours.
Luke, give us an
Um,
understanding so percentage wise or like within a month, how often are you in a firefight?
yeah, so percentage wise, I would say it's pretty high. We were there for a while. We were hitting an IED just about every other day. So about 50% of the time we rolled out. I would say even higher than that in some cases. But about 50% of the time we'd either come across or get hit by an IED. When you have such a heavy presence, they're not allowed to the time to install these bigger IEDs, right? Like say you have a 500-pound bomb and you hook an IED up to it, they're not going to have time to dig it and get everything hidden. So we were hitting a lot of these smaller mortar IEDs, right? So they would use these little 82 millimeter mortar rounds, and they did not have very much effect against up armored vehicles.
Okay.
They moved on to artillery rounds.
So you would, when you say hit, because I see like, again, watching videos, I would see where they would have something scanning for IEDs. Are you saying you were actually rolling over them and they were blowing up?
Yep, yep. So there's several different types of IEDs. We would oftentimes roll next to an IED. These IEDs were pointed towards us, and they would either call a certain number on a cell phone, and it would trigger it, or they would use a walkie-talkie. And when they press the button, it would trigger it. And then in other cases, we had pressure plates where we would drive over a pressure plate, and it makes contact,
Yeah.
basically breaks the circuit and sets the IED off. And
That's
then
kind of like when I think someone like me who's not in the military, that's what I think of, the pressure plate one.
right, yeah, they're not actually. There are a lot of them, but the majority of them are what we call command detonate. So it has a actual small copper wire that runs from the IED fuse all the way to a device that they can just click, and it sets it off.
Gotcha.
They eventually moved on to indirect detonate, where they'd use a walkie-talkie or a cell phone or something like that, and just they would put the receiver into the fuse, and when it made connection, it would set the IED off. Yeah.
Got it. So you're dealing with the IEDs every other day pretty much. And then how often are you clearing, like I don't know if I'm using the right terminology, but clearing a building, how often does that happen?
So on my second tour, and sometimes as I've gotten older, I've started to kind of melt the two into each other. Um, but on our second tour, I don't recall clearing too many houses on our second tour. I remember firefights. I remember us getting into some fist fights with some guys out there. I mean firefights with some guys out there a couple different times. I don't remember so much the room clearing on my second tour. It could have happened just as much. But I do know on our first tour, there was quite a bit going on there, especially as we were doing cordon and search. Yeah.
And did you say first tour was in Baghdad? Where are you at? Where are you at now? What
I was
location?
I was all over Iraq.
Okay.
We went out to a place called Al Rutba, which was on the Jordanian-Syrian border. Then we went to Ramadi, and we were in Ramadi for about 3 months, and then we started operating out of Al Asad, which is a major air base there now, and working at a place called Haditha Dam, Anna, they're Rawa, just these different cities that were all kind of connected along the Euphrates, and that went all the way to Syria. And
Okay.
so we worked from Al Qaim all the way down to, well, not really, but we worked a very large portion there in Iraq,
Gotcha.
from Haditha on.
And you were there to accomplish something, and then once you accomplished it, you moved on to the next.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So sometimes it was like that. But for instance, actually, when we took one of our biggest hits on my first tour, we were actually delivering money to Anna. So a lot of things people don't think about in combat or in war is there's a currency for every country. Well, there was a currency in Iraq, and it all had Saddam Hussein's face on it. Well, he was hung. He was dead at this point. Well, he wasn't hung yet, but he was captured at this point in time. And so we had to help the revenue, and we had to bring in more money. And so what we would do is we would go to the banks in these different cities, pick up their cash with all Saddam Hussein money, and give them new cash. And then we give them weapons, and then we would give them medical supplies and food and stuff like that. And so it it sounds simple, but there was a lot of resistance in those types of missions.
Yeah.
Um,
When you think about the people of Iraq, um, what's your, I think we think of, our enemies was Iraq or Afghanistan.
Right.
Did you notice that a lot of the people were against us, for us, happy that we were there? What are your thoughts on that? I mean, obviously
Yeah.
there's probably a mixture of that, but
Yeah.
in
So
general.
I would compare it to the United States, and I would say that there's two different types. There's people that are some of the hardest working, most loving people you'll ever meet in your life. Some of the kindest, nicest people, genuinely, that you'll ever meet in your life. And they were probably about 30% of the population, and about 70% of them absolutely despised us. You knew that if you shook their hand, you'd turn around and they could shoot you in the head. They were very dangerous. Um, However, right, like a foreign army came in and occupied their country. So I would expect a lot of people to to also kind of
Yeah.
in the United States react the same way.
Yeah. Could you imagine someone doing that in the United States? How we would feel about it? I mean,
Yeah.
you'd have to be a certain person to like still be loving.
Yeah.
Hey guys, thanks for clicking on the video. I appreciate it. If you could do me a favor, this video is all about our veterans. And whether you're in the military, thinking about joining the military, or you're out of the military, dealing with PTSD, or maybe you have recovered from it and is going through life. But I want to make sure you take the time, hit subscribe, because that helps out with the algorithm, pushes out to those other people that need to hear this video. Thank you guys. Let's get to it. Okay, so people, you said 30% were kind of in support and favor of what's going on. 70%,
Yeah,
would rather
and
shoot you.
that's my perspective. Some people might have experienced something a little bit different. I would even, let's throw those percentages out. I would even say there's a small percentage that just didn't care, right? Especially as you get out into the country, you get out into the farm life. They didn't care. They were just trying to farm.
They weren't affected as much by it.
Right. The only time they did care is if, say, we decided to drive a Humvee across a field that they just finished disking, right? But they don't disc a field the way that we disc a field. And what I talk about disking is kicking up the dirt in that field so they can plant, right? Mm-hmm. They don't disc with tractors out there. They have hand plows and they're out there disking, 10 acres of land with hand plows.
So if you smash that dirt back down with with your Hummer, they're going to be ticked.
They're going to be ticked, and they're still indifferent to who the good guy is and the bad guy is. They don't care. You just kick the dirt down, and they're going to go, and somebody's going to come and say, "Hey, have you seen Americans? Yeah, these dudes came and drove all over my field that I was getting ready to plant." And yeah, so. Gotcha. But for the most part, they didn't care. A small number of them, once you got out there into what you would call the country here, they just didn't care.
Yeah.
They were just trying to live.
All right. Well, thanks for kind of building that up. I want to talk about maybe a couple memorable battles that you were in that you feel comfortable sharing with us. So I think the audience would appreciate it.
Yeah, so I'll cover just two, and one from the first tour and one from the second tour. I kind of fall back on these because obviously they can be a little bit difficult to talk about. So the on my first tour we would go down these routes at nighttime just to make sure there was a curfew set out in Iraq. And we would go down these routes to make sure everybody was following curfew. The people that weren't following curfew, you were allowed to shoot on sight. I mean, you could take it that they were bad people, right?
Yeah.
However, we're still human ourselves, and we still use our common sense. And if they didn't have a weapon, if they obviously weren't a threat, and they just didn't know what the law was or what the rule was, if they didn't get a flyer, we wouldn't engage them. So we were in Ramadi, and we came around this bend, and and nobody in our unit yet had engaged anybody as far as actually being able to confirm that they had a hit on anybody. And we come around this bend, and I'm in a Bradley at this point in time, and we have a
what is a Bradley?
so it's a very armored fighting vehicle. It has a M242 Bushmaster on it. I'm in a special one. It's called a B Fist, so it's for forward observers.
So is that the
It
big
has
gun?
a
Is that the big gun on top, the Bushmaster you just mentioned?
yeah,
Okay.
the 25 millimeter cannon
Okay.
is what it is,
I'm gonna
and
try to
then
build out the visual for the audience because you're gonna say stuff
yeah,
as a military guy that most of us won't understand.
yeah. So if they want to look it up, it's called the M7 B Fist.
Okay.
And I was on the M7 B Fist, and it had a 25 millimeter cannon on it. The 242 Bushmaster is what it's called, and it's coaxed with a 7.62. So there's a 7.62 that is on the same gun line as that 25. We have an option if we get into a direct engagement of whether or not we need to use the 25 or we need to use the 7.62. There's a rule that follows that, like on how you decide that. A lot of it has to do with one, distance, two, the type of target you're firing at. So if you're firing at personnel, most of the time you're not going to use your 25 mic unless they're in a vehicle or behind a wall or in a wood line. You'll use your HE 25 millimeter cannon rounds.
Okay.
And so I'm coming around a corner. It's nighttime, and I have my thermals on, and I'm looking through my thermals. And just to let you know, there's a difference of temperature of plus or minus 1 degree or 0.1 degree that I can see on reflection on those thermals. So I can basically count your teeth at nighttime with this at 1,000 meters.
Are you
And
inside
so
the vehicle or are you up top on that gun?
I'm inside the vehicle in the turret.
Okay.
So it's a turret. It has a turret on top of it,
Okay, I got you.
and the turrets where the gunner sits, and the TC is what we call him, the commander, right?
Yep.
And so I'm in the turret, and I'm looking through the thermals, and I count 10 personnel crossing the road, and three of them have AK-47s, and but I'm 800 meters away from them. So I have a lasing device, and I can tell you exactly how far they are within a meter or within 10 meters. Um, and they were actually at 810 meters is how far they were. And I sit there for a second, and I'm looking at them, and I knew that they were legal targets to engage, but I didn't want to. This was like my first. I didn't think it would be this way, right? I thought engaging personnel would be. I thought it would be just something that just happens, right? Just naturally, you'll just come up to your training, shoot, and it works that way. And it didn't work that way. I didn't want to fire. And but I'm sitting there counting them, and I'm excited. I'm getting more and more excited because I know that they aren't doing whatever they were supposed to do. And I called over my commander. Hey, I got you know troops in front of me. Three of them have weapons, and he was like, drop them all. And I'm still sitting there for a second, and he's like coax, and I'm lasing them. I keep lasing them. I keep watching them. And one of the guys with the AK-47, I don't know what made him compelled him to do this, but he turned around with his AK-47 and was pointing it at me. And as soon as he did, that was my first personal contact using a weapon with enemy. And yeah, so none of them made it out of there.
Yeah.
So that was my first engagement.
So you have
The
to call it in, which seems kind of okay. Well, yeah, we'll call it in, but you're also making the decision of what's going to
well, there's
occur at this point.
yeah, there is an escalation of force, right? Like if it's an immediate threat, I don't have to call it in. I can obviously defend myself. I can defend my guys. I can defend my equipment. I don't have to call it in immediately. And in that situation, technically, I didn't have to call it in either. I could have just started, dropping these dudes because they were an immediate threat.
Yeah. I guess
And so,
I'm trying to feel the weight of making that decision. Like the weight of, hey, I see guys, 3 of them have guns, probably means something bad from where we're at, but I've got to call it in, and then there's going to be like the okay, and yeah, it's just that's a lot. That's a lot of weight.
there there's a lot more that went into it than I figured. Matter of fact, on our way back from that, so my belief now, a moral code that I go by now, standard of living is I don't drink, I don't smoke, I follow a certain standard, and it's guidance from the church, but it's also just like standard, right?
Yeah.
But at the time, I did. Uh, so I was inactive from church, and I was a dipper. And right after that engagement, did you not, I was dipping and smoking a cigarette at the same time. I was so amped up. And then on our way back to the fob is what it's called, or the base, right? The forward operating base. On our way back to the fob, just like something in me changed. I can't explain it. I do know that nothing has been right since then. And I, something deep down inside of me changed. And I just felt really sad and I felt really dark. Um, I tried to talk about it to one of my NCOs, and he was like, "Oh man, that was awesome, that was good." And I was like, "No, was it though? What was it really like?" But yeah, I talk about our Afghanistan brothers and sisters, or I talk about some of these guys that had to fight in the Battle of Fallujah 1 and 2, or whatever. That's different. These guys are legitimately about to die. You know what I mean? But
Mm-hmm.
in this case, I was safe, and so it was just a matter of taking bad guys out of an area, right?
Right.
And so there was a moral challenge that I fought with myself that has not completely gone away since then.
I got you.
It gets easier sometimes, and I've definitely learned how to deal with it in different ways. But
Yeah,
so yeah, so
and you're how old at this time?
46. Oh, at
No,
the
at
time,
that time.
so 24,
24.
22 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah. That's that's a I mean, that's the age of a lot of soldiers, but I think it's good for us as we think about the positions that they put in. There's kind of that, I don't know if you call it that romance side of it. Like, what I mean by that is like me as a kid thinking about soldiers. Like, my grandpa was in World War II. I was like, oh yeah, my grandpa was at war. But I've told you this, but my grandpa, 90 years old, explaining to me some of his battle scenes, it was tough for him to get through them. And he didn't go into the
Yeah,
details very much like what you've done, but emotionally, 70 years later, he's still feeling it.
it's very interesting. Matter of fact, but there's sociopaths out there. There's sociopaths in the army. There's not everybody wants to accept that necessarily. Army's good guys, right? No, there's sociopaths out there that are desensitized naturally to the effects of combat. Never envied those guys. Never have. Um, it's not very common that you see something like that. Matter of fact, most people that have actually gone through engagements at some point, one point or another, have had to live with accepting what they've done,
Right.
right? Um, and there becomes this almost this um, I don't know, this dichotomy of thought where I did what I had to do, but at the same time, uh, he was doing what he had to do.
Yeah.
What made me morally superior to him
Right.
that allowed me to make that call, right?
Yeah.
Or it just so happens to be that I had the advantage
Right.
technologically.
Right. So take us through one more battle kind of that you'd like to talk about. I got one in my brain that you told me before. I kind of hope it's that one because that one was kind of
I,
a neat one for me, but to listen to. But if you don't want to do that one, we can do another, and then we'll go to post military.
I know which one you're talking about, and that one's kind of mine now. I
Okay.
kind of keep that to myself.
Okay.
It just different times,
Yep. I hear you.
different ideas. And but talking about the reality of war, we were out on a 12-hour mission, and we were doing the whole route security type deal, and it was the end of the mission. So we were about 11 hours into this mission, and we had stopped in this palm grove off this route to just kind of rest up, drink water, kind of regroup, talk about the day or whatever. And so we're out there, we're outside of our vehicles in this palm grove, and there's a field next to the palm grove. And I see out of nowhere, it was almost like you're deer hunting. You just sit there and you see these deer walk out grazing out of nowhere. Well, I looked up, and there just so happened to be 4 or 5 military-aged men that popped up out of nowhere, planting stuff, like almost like they were planting rice or something. But where they were planting it didn't make sense. And I guess they just thought, we're Americans, we didn't understand that.
Mhm.
So I grabbed my interpreter, and I said, let's go up there and talk to him. And my interpreter was super scared to do this. He was a local national. So we walk up, and I go up to the very first guy, and I say, Salam alaikum. And he just looks at me. And I was like, this dude here. I said, hey, you tell him. I looked over at my interpreter. I said, you tell him that when we drive out of this palm grove, when we hit that IED, he's going to be the first dude I kill when we leave. And he was like, no, 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 no. I'm not going to tell him that, mister. I'm not going to tell him that. And I was like, no, you tell him. And I was like, or I'm going to kill you. Yeah, I'm just talking.
Yeah.
And so he looks over at the guy, and he tells the guy, and the guy looks at me and smiles. And I was like, oh, it's on. Oh, it is on. So I'm like, okay, dude, this dude wants to, okay. So we get in our vehicles, and we're leaving out of this small road going up a hill onto this route called ADA route. It's 2 roads, and the road is split in the middle by a canal. So you couldn't get to the other side of the road without crossing the canal.
So
So
this
we
is
get up on
field
top of,
out in the country, dirt roads. Is this
yeah. So thank you, Kansas, with a couple palm trees here and there.
okay?
And just flat. Grass is not tall, but in the canal, the leads are really, really, really high.
Okay.
In the canal, when I talk about driving up onto a canal, I'm not talking about driving up onto like a little 5 foot berm. I'm talking about driving up a 20, 30 foot berm.
Okay.
There's a couple of houses that are out there, and then there's a chicken house made of adobe that's out there as well. And so we drive out onto ADA road, and as soon as I get probably about 200 meters down ADA road, boom, an IED goes off. It hits my rear vehicle. And I turn around and I look, and those dudes are running as fast as they can, because it's just field, and they're running towards the palm grove that we were at. And he's about 500 meters away, and I shoot at him. I shoot at him 3 or 4 times. I don't know if I don't know what happened. He did not fall. He did not act like he was phased one bit. But I get back to the back because I'm worried now more about my guys. I get back to the back, and everybody in the vehicle is incapacitated. I thought that they were dead. And so I jump up onto the vehicle, and I open up the hatch because he's in. I was in a Humvee. They were in a M7 Bfist. And I open up the driver's hatch, and the driver's in there, and he's screaming because his leg is busted up so bad because of where the IED hit. The IED hit right under the engine. And I was like, okay, he's alive. So I kind of let him be, and I ran up to the top because I couldn't see any of my other guys. Like, they're usually kind of sticking out of the turrets a little bit, and I couldn't see either one of them. And I looked down into the turret, and 2 of my guys are laid out pretty good. And I pull them out. They're concussed. One of them is his eyes are kind of rolling back in his head a little bit.
Just me again here, guys. A short break. If you haven't hit subscribe yet, and if you like the story, do me a favor. We're going to have more guys in the military on telling their stories. This will make sure those stories get to you. Please click subscribe. Thanks.
And I pulled them out of the vehicle, get them up beside the vehicle, and I had to call in a medevac for them. And but we were in the wide open, and at the time there was only 8 of us, right? And so out of this 8, 4 of them I was getting ready to medevac out, and because they were all just incapacitated inside this vehicle. Matter of fact, the whole IED didn't go off. Had the whole IED gone off, then they would have died right there on the spot instead of making it back to the hospital. But there was this IED round, there was this artillery round that was laying behind the vehicle, matter of fact, and I remember just seeing it laying there in the dirt, and I was like, man, this is crazy. So I call in a medevac. The medevac lands right on top of the canal road, which is a pretty amazing feat in and of itself. And I get 3 of my guys loaded up, and I keep one of them back because I needed him. Even though his leg was messed up, I was like, man, we gotta mass fire superiority. We gotta have fire superiority because I don't know if we're getting ready to get engaged. And I'm so glad we did, because the medevac took off with the other guys, and we started getting shot at.
So medevac took off with how many guys? How many guys was there total?
So there's total 4. So there's 8 of us all together,
Okay.
and in the vehicle, 3 of them got medevaced out.
3 of them. Okay, so you've got you've got 5 left behind.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and so we do start getting shot at. Bullets start coming in, and we're doing everything we can because we feel like it was kind of hard to judge exactly where the rounds were coming from. We finally decided that the rounds were coming from this chicken house that was made of adobe. I don't know if you've ever tried.
What is adobe?
Adobe is like a clay brick.
Okay.
You think of southwestern homes, you know how they have that kind of tan look to them. That's an adobe.
Got it.
That's an adobe style. Of course, there's standards in the United States on home building. There might not be very many over there in Iraq, but shooting rounds through adobe, it might not seem quite as easy as it looks, you know, because it is a thick wall.
Right.
And so we would shoot back, and we were shooting at them. By this time, it's nighttime, and they're cussing at us. The insurgents are cussing at us from this chicken house, and they're cussing at us from the other opposite side of where we're at. And the leg on the soldier that I kept back kept swelling and kept getting worse and worse and worse. And I had a medic with me, and my medic was like, he could have internal bleeding that we don't know about. He could have a pretty bad fracture in there, and he could have some problems. And so I called in a second medevac and brought that and had him taken out.
So his leg was it was all internal though; it wasn't bleeding that you could visually see, or it was.
You know, I don't remember any blood necessarily.
But either way, it's
I do remember a wrap on it.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I remember a wrap on it. I want to say that it was bleeding. But I can't remember. No, okay. I don't remember. I do know that it had a wrap on it. And so we called in another medevac and had them taken out. Well, there was a whole lot of stuff that went on during this. It ended up being 36 hours long that we were stuck out there. There's a whole lot that went on with it.
So the reason why, from the time you make contact to this guy that smirks at you to the time you guys actually get out of there, you're a day and a half.
A day and a half on mission, yeah.
Wow.
And so there's a whole lot that goes in there, and I'm not going to get into too many of those details. But the one detail, the reason why I wanted to talk about the whole thing is because it kind of shows the dark humor in military, right? Because this is the one part out of that whole thing that kind of stuck with me, and I look back at it and I laugh, and I tell people that, and I start laughing, and they're like, "Why are you laughing?" You know, But we were about, the sun was coming up. We were all exhausted. I was mad as all get go and frustrated because these guys just they weren't showing themselves very well. And when we did see them, we didn't have much of an opportunity. There was one point where well, I won't get into that, but I get on top of my vehicle. I'm mad. I'm upset. I get on top of my vehicle. I take all my armor off. I take my plates off. I take my helmet off. I throw my helmet down on the ground, and I'm like, man, this stinking war. And I'm like, showing myself to him, right? And so I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna lay down. I'm gonna lay down here, and I'm gonna take a freaking nap. I'm freaking tired. I'm exhausted, and I laid down. And it was as soon as I laid down and I closed my eyes for a second, and I didn't have any intention on falling asleep, but I was exhausted. I laid down in my vehicle, closed my eyes, and as soon as I did, I heard ping up against my vehicle, and I look over, and there's a grenade rolling off into the canal, and I'm like, what? Boom! And it blows up, and I'm like, oh my gosh! And I jump up and I throw my Kevlar on, and I hear bing again, and I look over, and it's another grenade. They keep chunking these grenades at me, trying to get them on top of my vehicle into my turret to blow me up. But
So
have,
how close are you to the Adobe here?
so from the Adobe, I'm about 300 meters from the Adobe.
So
So
they're not throwing these grenades.
they're throwing them from the canal. That's
Oh,
how close they were.
oh, they're in the canal. I gotcha.
They're in the canal at this point, right? And so they were inside the canal throwing these grenades at me. And I'm like, oh crap. And I'm throwing my stuff on. I grab my rifle, roll off the other side of the vehicle, and come around. And me and this other guy, Torres, we just start lighting up the whole, canal. We're just like, shooting into the canal and everything like that. But there was nothing quicker that got me to put my, and it snapped me right back into reality. I think I was up for at least another 24 hours after that. I was so amped up. I was upset. Also, we took some hard hits over the night, and but it was an eye opening experience uh, to go through that. Especially, you know, that was
Luke,
the first time.
I think this is the story that I wanted you to tell. I think this is
Oh, really?
well, unless you laid down on the Hummer multiple times. The story that I was thinking of, you did
No,
the same thing.
no, that was it. So
How did you
yeah,
end up
that.
getting out of that scenario? Like,
So we had a recovery team come out and get us,
okay,
and they recovered our rear vehicle. That was the whole reason why we were out there. We were waiting for the rear vehicle. Matter of fact, two recovery teams went to come in, and they hit IEDs on their way in, so they had to do recovery operations for themselves. And
okay,
that's why we didn't have somebody come and recover us earlier. There was
gotcha.
only two routes in where we were at, and yeah, so that was uh, one heck of an experience. But oftentimes in combat, you learn a lot about things. And I've heard people say my life flashed before my eyes. I remember there was one point where I was standing behind my vehicle, and I was getting ready to step out, and literally my life flashed before my eyes. From my very first memory to that moment of me standing right there in that moment, my whole life literally flashed before my eyes, and I remembered in great vivid detail every moment that I could remember.
Wow.
And it was one of the most crazy, most powerful experiences I had ever had uh, going through that. But I also think about that moment because that's the moment my life flashed before my eyes. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So you, I'm, I'm putting myself. We're going to talk about. We're getting into your post-military career and things that you had to deal with after. But that's an intense situation, and you had said that IEDs. I mean, this was like an every other day occurrence. Um, Mental health had to just. I mean, that stuff seems like it would be always in the back of your mind for a full straight year and Do they are all tours for a year, or some 6 months, or some a year and a half, or is that pretty common?
Depends who you're with. Marines, I think they typically do. I think they do a year also, but I think some of their units might do 6 months. I know some of the special forces units they do 3 months,
Is that
just
just
because
because
there's
the intensity of what they're doing? Okay,
exactly right. Yeah, it's the intensity of their mission, right?
got it.
And I wasn't special forces, so we stayed out a year. Um, yeah, the very first time I realized there was actually an issue is I was home on leave from Iraq, and I didn't really think that I had any problems. I just thought I was back home on leave, enjoying life, and
First
I
or
was
second?
standing at
First or second tour?
second tour.
Okay.
So I'm standing outside, and I hear in Arkansas. I'm standing outside, and I hear AK-47 fire, pop, pop, clear as you and I are talking right here. I heard AK-47 fire followed by an explosion, and I was like, "Oh, I got scared and I ran inside, and my mother-in-law, my father-in-law are sitting on the couch, and I said, "Did y'all hear that?" And they were like, "Did we hear what?" And I knew at that point in time that I wasn't thinking right, and I was like, "Oh, nothing." I was like, "Never mind." I went into the bathroom, and at that point, I think is when I really started to become recluse and kind of withdraw from my own personal family.
Just scared of what could happen with that? Scared for yourself,
Just
scared for others?
I yeah, just I knew that I had experienced a lot of things, and that I think coming in and saying, "Did y'all hear that?" and they said no. I think that was kind of like a sign for me. This is all on you. It's,
Hmm.
only you can deal with this.
Gotcha.
So it was. I just felt alone. Uh, felt. I wouldn't say scared necessarily. I just felt alone in this world that I was now living in.
Are you married with kids at this time?
Yeah, so I'm married, and we have our twins, our boys who were 2 at the time, and we have our son who was a newborn,
Okay.
and I mean he was a newborn. So yeah,
So,
and
Luke, take me through. So you've had, I don't know if the right terminology, and I don't mean it in an offensive way. You've had like spouts of good and bad, right? Since the war. Like
I
where
think
where
that's
you're
putting it.
mentally good, and then and then something happens, and then it seems like, at least since I know you, I've known of two that happened. I think before I moved to Arkansas, and then right after. From what I understand, you had kind of another one that came up.
Yeah, I think that's putting it kindly. I've definitely had my struggles. Um, especially with addiction. So you come back, let's say you come back from an engagement like that, or combat, and the military, oh man, they were so good at prescribing, and especially at this point in time, I'm an E6 promotable, and I'm coming in and I'm like, man, my back's killing me, my neck's killing me, I'm hurting, this and that, and they're like, oh yeah, don't worry about it, here's your 60 Percocet and 60 Valium. As soon as you run out, give me a call or come back.
And back and necks hurting you from carrying all the weight, or there's something has happened during battle.
That's from an injury, right?
An injury.
From my yeah,
Okay.
and so they would push me all these pills, right? And I wasn't drinking, but buddy, I was on pills, and I would take the pills, and I remember, I actually remember the very first time um, that I had actually realized that pills were helping me. What I thought was helping me mentally was, I was sitting in the living room, and I was hurting. I was stressed out. I was quiet. I had a lot of anxiety going on, and my wife said, "Hey, Luke, I'm gonna run to this girls' party over at this girl's house, and we're gonna hang out for a couple hours, and we'll be back." I was like, okay. She's like, you got the kids, and I was like, yeah, yeah, sure, I can handle the kids, And she leaves, and they're running. My twin boys are sitting there wrestling each other across the floor. My newborn's sitting in his baby swing, and I'm losing it. And I'm like, man, I gotta do something. If I can just control the pain, I'll be okay. So I go into the medicine cabinet. Well, my wife never took her pills,
You're losing
never.
it from physical pain or meant something mentally happening.
All of it's combined.
Okay.
Everything's working together. Yeah. So I'm hurting and mentally and physically. And I go into my wife's medicine cabinet, and there's something called hydrocodone, and so I decided to take a couple of those, and there was something for anxiety in there, and it was called Valium, and so I took a couple of those.
The good
20
stuff.
minutes later, yeah, 20 minutes later, man, I was rolling around on the floor with my kids. Life was so good. My wife comes home, I give her a kiss. We go upstairs, we have a great night. Everything's wonderful. I wake up the next day and I feel twice as bad as I did before I took the medicine. So, what did my mind go? Or what did my mind do? It was like, hey, I know what fixes this. So I went downstairs, and then that was where the whole cycle started. And
That
and
last, what
and
years would that, and how long did it last?
that would have been in 2006, and it lasted like hardcore. It lasted until 2014. No, 2015.
Wow.
And so yeah, but it was on and off. Like I didn't realize
So it's
the
like a 20
the
a 20-year issue.
well,
No,
so
2062. I'm sorry,
10,
9 year, 10 9 10
nine
year.
years, yeah.
Yeah.
And so during those times though, like, within a couple of years, I knew it was a problem, right? Like
Yeah.
I knew it was a problem within a year, but it was really a problem within a couple of years. But it took a good 10 years for there to be actual movement and being able to get over that. So I would have
You're
long
being
spouts.
prescribed these pills through the military or
Yeah.
through they're just
Well, at first military and then private doctor.
okay.
Um, yeah, there was long spouts of sobriety, right? Like I would go a year sober,
Hmm.
and then, but there was almost this cycle. The summer months were always hard for me. Um, just I don't know why. Physiologically, I think my mind was, or physiologically, I think I was set to kind of go on this psychological path during hot months, right? Like maybe a trigger, we can call it. And then around the holidays, I would always have a hard time. And so that went on. I would sober up, I would do well, and it was always, well, I've had multiple surgeries. I might end up having to go do a surgery or something like that, and so it was a struggle on and off for a really long time. And but yeah, so it
Okay.
was.
So what got you off of that cycle? And I guess
Well,
well, let me be more specific. What got you off the medicine?
yeah. So uh, I knew it was not doing good for me.
Uh-huh.
And doctors had told me this, uh, but more importantly, my wife would tell me this. What really got me off of it was uh, I went to there. It was a really bad place in 2015. Like, yeah, like mentally, not a not a the darkest it had ever been. Me and my wife were separated for about 6 months during this time,
Hmm.
and so some things happened within that. Nothing illegal or anything like that, but just with me personally, mentally, some things happened with me uh, that really I had to make a decision. Right, there was a point where I could either, and excuse me for saying this, I could either start a pistol, or I could start making some changes in my life. And every day since Iraq, there was that was always an option for me, and it was an option I always looked at as um, a very good option, like my go to. but I love my kids and I love my wife. And I didn't want to be without them. I didn't want them to be without me, but I didn't want them to hurt like I hurt. And that was part of the 6 month separation between me and my wife. And back in 2015 was that, you know, she couldn't take it anymore, and I certainly didn't want them to hurt anymore. And I knew it wasn't because of choices she was making. I knew it wasn't because of choices my kids were making. You know, I knew the cause of it. And so anyway, I had a choice in 2015. You can either do this or you can make some changes. And I decided to go ahead and start the long path of recovery. Do not get me wrong when I say there are still, well, I don't, not now. I would say 5 years ago, there's still moments where I would have a struggle, right? Like maybe a relapse for, you know, a month, or not even a month, like just a relapse. I just go and do it, you know, get a prescription or something like that. Um, but the mentality, the drive, the want what's best for my family, what's best for me, it has that's what changed in 2015. I would say it's only been within the past 2 years that I've actually started to really love who I am as a person, and to recognize that I'm a very good man. And it's taken me a long time to realize that. And I think that was part of that pattern that created this cycle of addiction. It came along with, how do I deal with these nightmares? How do I deal with these anxieties when I'm in public? You know, and I go to my church, and there was just nobody with me at church that could really relate with me, or talk to me about, you know, what's important, you know, to me, because they're all, in my eyes, were speaking from a lens of a cookie cutter ideal world that they lived in. And so it was difficult, um, to really find reprieve and really appreciate who I was. And so, yeah,
Thanks,
I hope
Luke.
that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Luke, you were I guess you were kind of in a movie, but they used I saw you at the very end where they used you, which was awesome. And I know that you were a part of the radio. I think the voice and radio and stuff, but you were in or part of a movie called Mending the Line.
I was, yeah.
And some of that was they took some of that information that I think you said from journals that journal entries you had, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So I was fly fishing in Bozeman with this group called Warriors in Quiet Waters. Here I am fly fishing, and this movie director and this screenwriters out there. I had no idea they were going to be out there. And they come up to me and they start
Sorry,
talking to me.
Luke, sorry, are you there for therapy? Or are you there just like as a vacation?
No, this time I was there as a mentor. I was
As a
there helping
mentor.
out other people.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm out there. I'm out there.
And what year? What year is this?
2021.
Okay. So not
2020. 2020.
got it.
And so I'm out there as a mentor, and this producer and the screenwriter come up to me, and we just start talking, honestly. And they started asking me a little bit about my military experience, and I tell them, and they're like, "Man, you got an awesome story." They were like, "Do you mind if we're writing this movie? We have some ideas. Do you mind if we send you the script when you get home, and you can read the script and let us know what you think of it?" And I was like, "Man, that's awesome. Yeah, I would love to read a script before the movie comes out. I think that's cool, you know." They were like, "All right." So they sent me the script, and I was like, "Oh, oof, no, this is not going to be a good movie," because they had like the military lingo wrong. They just the whole vibe, everything was
Yeah.
written by somebody that wasn't in the military, right?
Right.
So they called me up on a group call and said, "What'd you think?" I was like, "Well, do you want the truth, or do you want me to just tell you it was good?" And they were like, "Well, no, we want the truth." And I was like, "Yeah, man." I was like, "It needs some work." And they were like, well, what do you mean? And I was like, well, for instance, you know, in the scene, Coulter flies into Montana and he gets out of his car and or he gets out of the airplane and a car drives by and it backfires and he hits the ground. I asked him, I said, what is this, 1978? I was like, when's the last time you heard a car backfire? And they
Uncle,
were like,
I watched Uncle Buck a couple. Actually, I
yeah,
did a couple
exactly.
of days ago. I watched it with my wife, and yeah, that's probably the only
Yeah,
time I've ever heard one.
yeah. You know, and they were like, man, that's actually a great point. They were like, do you have any experiences? I was like, man, I got a great one. And we were in church in Fort Smith, Arkansas. It's 2011, and a lady that you and I both know, I'm not going to mention her name on here, dropped a chair behind me in church, and I take a knee, like I immediately take a knee, face her, and I start reaching for my sidearm, which I did not have on me, but it was just like an automatic reaction to reach for my sidearm or my M4. You know, I was just going into this protective thing, and she looks at me, she starts laughing, and she knew my situation, and I just started crying because I didn't know what else to do. Like I was so mad at her, I was so embarrassed, I was sad, and I just started crying, and I got up and I left. And so I told them that, and they were like, "Oh my gosh, we got to put that in the movie." And so you know they did. They ended up putting that in the movie, and so I started telling them stuff like that. I told them about this reoccurring nightmare I had. You know, I was like, "Don't put this in the movie." I was like, "But I had this reoccurring nightmare." And lo and behold, I'm watching the edit of the movie, and there's the nightmare in the movie. You know, but anyway, I'm not upset about that. So yeah, so they took my experiences specifically with dealing with combat trauma and put that into the movie. Really leaned heavy into it.
Hey guys, thanks for clicking on the video. I appreciate it. If you could do me a favor, this video is all about our veterans. And whether you're in the military, thinking about joining the military, or you're out of the military, dealing with PTSD, or maybe you have recovered from it and is going through life. But I want to make sure you take the time, hit subscribe, because that helps out with the algorithm, pushes out to those other people that need to hear this video. Thank you guys. Let's get to it. So as far as the but you had been to this, you had done some type of what am I trying to say, therapy at this same location that you're now mentoring and you were talking to these people about, or no?
Yeah. So the way that the program works is you first of all you got to fill out an application and apply for it, and they fly you out there if it's your very first time, and they take you on a fly fishing trip, right? And the
Mm-hmm.
idea is to find healing through fly fishing with this group, and it's so therapeutic, so helpful.
Can
They
you talk a
they
little
they
bit
hook you
about
up with a guy.
that symbolism of what they talked about in the movie?
Yeah. Uh, so there's actually I have an NPR article. Well, not my article. I kind of interviewed on this a little bit in NPR, where um, you know there's a struggle that we all deal with. I think internally, especially when it comes to a combat vet. There's something that's constantly clawing at you, and you're kind of cyclic with your thought patterns and just continuously thinking about it, thinking about it, thinking about it, and it doesn't go away. The thing about fly fishing is there's a process that takes place where you have to force yourself to slow down, right? You think about regular fishing, you just cast your line out there just as hard as you can to see how far you can throw it. Well, in fly fishing, you're forced to slow down and think about your movements and your casting pattern, and it's almost an artwork that takes place when you do that. But in Montana's, they're heavy on catch and release, right? And so you go through this struggle of learning how to cast your line out into the water and you know endure the elements of cold weather or walking over the rocks, wading through water, whatever it is. and you finally hook onto this fish that you've been going after probably for, at this point in time, a good month. The point is it takes time to actually get this fish that you're trying to catch so hard. And I kind of relate that almost to like the struggle that we have. There's a struggle that we just can't put our hands on. There's something that needs healing, and we just can't find exactly where that spot is that needs healed. And you finally hook onto the fish. You finally catch a hold of what that problem is, and you bring it all the way in. And instead of bringing that fish home, killing the fish, eating it up, you appreciate the fish, you hold it, and you take the hook out of its mouth and you release it and you let it back out into the water to where it no longer affects you, right? It's there, you recognize it, you know where it's at, you know where you can find it again if you ever need to go back and revisit it. You know where you can go back and you can revisit it, right? But you you know that at the end of the day, it's just something as small as a fish that you can hold in your hand. It's just something that it's there, it's tangible.
Yeah.
And so it's basically taking this struggle that we have that isn't tangible and making it into something tangible that you can hold and release back into the water, and you can let all those emotions go. You can let that stress and that struggle, all those hard days, all those hard mornings and nights that you stayed awake all through the night, you can just let all that go. The guys you didn't bring home, the people that you've killed, the injuries that you've sustained, the wives you've had to call, you can let all that go just right there, you know.
Yeah. How did you get invited to do that, and how does someone in your situation get invited?
So you got to be a veteran. Used to when I went, it was you had to be a combat veteran. I think they might have changed the rules up a little bit since we've moved further away from Iraq and Afghanistan. You see some of these companies, these 501(c)s do that, but you just had to be a combat veteran and apply for it. And if you qualified, they would fly you out there and you could fly fish. Cool thing about it is they gave you everything that you needed. They gave you the waders, they gave you the boots, they fed you, you slept in an $11 million home. They gave you the guides, they gave you the places to fish, and it was just a wonderful thing. So
Is this a military through the military, or is this like someone that's
this is a this is a 501(c)(3), and
okay?
and it's this one in particular was called Warriors in Quiet Waters. I haven't done much with them as of lately. They have you know I'll just say new management, but every one of them still are great people. Yeah, that really do care about veterans. It's just that as I've started to heal and as I've started to move on, I think that it's not a place that I go back to anymore.
Gotcha. Luke, if you had to counsel with a veteran that's struggling, is there a message that you wanted to deliver to them?
If there was anybody struggling with any type of internal uh, battle or internal struggle, no matter what it is, I would just say, first of all, hang tight, talk to somebody, and to continue to press forward. Those three things, like sometimes I think that in the military we're always taught to they say shoot, move, and communicate. Always to move, always to be prepared for the next thing. And sometimes in our situations, I think it's just best to just sit still, just to listen to those thoughts, acknowledge those feelings that you're feeling, identify them. The second thing is to go out there and find other like-minded people that you trust that you can talk to. You don't have That's a beautiful thing about having combat trauma and talking to somebody else that has combat trauma. You don't have to rehash the trauma because they already know what you're going through.
Hmm.
And so sometimes just going out there and finding somebody that has the same like-minded experience and just sitting there and listening to them or talking to them, it does wonders to get it off your chest. It does wonders to be able to talk to somebody that you trust. And that might be a therapist. It might be a mom or a dad or a bishop. But my suggestion is you find somebody like-minded and you talk and you talk and you talk, especially if you trust them not to judge or to sit there and listen. And then this too shall pass has never been more true than uh, for anybody than me. I have gone through some dark times since I've come back from combat. Some of it is self-imposed, and some of it is not self-imposed. But I do know now, I have the sense to know that when I'm going through a struggle, that it's just momentarily. It's going to pass. Sometimes it might last weeks. Sometimes it might last a couple months, but it's going to pass, and the sun is going to shine one day. The beauty that I think, and I'm going to take this back to faith because I am a very I love Heavenly Father and I love Jesus Christ. Without them, I wouldn't be sitting here where I am today. And if there's one thing that Heavenly Father and the Savior has taught me, is that we're all going to be on our mountaintop one day and we'll all see the beauty of everything that's around us. But what the Savior has taught me is when I'm down in those valleys, in those dark valleys, that there's still beauty through the trees. If you just look through the trees, you can still see the beauty that's all around you. And it might feel dark and it might feel deep, but I promise you, there's still beauty all around you if you just open your eyes and look for it. So just stick with it, carry on, and just make that extra mile.
Look, you said something, and maybe this is the same. This shall pass. But what's your favorite scripture that maybe has helped you through this?
Uh, yeah, so we're okay with the Book of Mormon.
Yeah, yeah, we're fine.
Okay. So I like Second Nephi, all of chapter 4. In Second Nephi chapter 4, Nephi at this point is looking back at his life, and he's kind of reflecting his life. And he opens up with, "Oh wretched man am I," and he kind of laments a little bit about his life and about some of the decisions that he's made and how unworthy he is. But then by about the middle of the chapter, he really starts to talk about the joy that he finds in Christ, and even in his pain, he can find happiness because he knows that all glory is to him, that he's created him, that he's put him in this place for a purpose. The second favorite scripture I get is from John 14:27. Peace I leave with you, peace I give unto you. Not as the world giveth I unto you. He was in the Savior was in the upper room in Jerusalem when he gave that speech, if you will, to his disciples right before he was crucified. And he wanted to remind them that he wasn't of this world, that he was something greater, and that he leaves peace with us so we can find joy while we're here on this earth. This trial of living on earth is not meant to be struggle only. Yes, there is struggle while we live here. There is struggle in life, no doubt about it. But we can find joy in that, and we can find that in his peace. I know this to be true. I've experienced it, I've witnessed it, and I live it now.
Wonderful, Luke. I appreciate you taking some time out of your life and to be able to share your experiences. They're very unique. I know there's others that have similar experiences, and I think it's good to be shared for people like me that's never experienced it to understand a little bit more how to help our veterans and those that are going through it. that maybe you're just in a different stage and may be able to help them out. I think it's good for them to know that they're not alone. I'm sure there's times where you felt alone. I know your family very well, and you have a wonderful wife and you have wonderful children, and they've been in the trenches along with you this whole time. And you've got a lot of people that have cheered for you and love you, and we see you as an American hero. So we appreciate your service.
Well, I appreciate that. I can take that a lot better than I used to. Somebody would say thank you for your service, and I wouldn't necessarily. It's an awkward feeling. I don't know really how to react. But I guess I will also say, I know we're coming to an end, but I also do want to say you brought up a very good point. My family has experienced so much, and they have gone through so much trial, and they have gone through so much trouble with me. They are, if you will, military themselves, just with the trauma that they've had to go through. They've had to live experiences that I wouldn't want anybody else to have to live through, and I've done that, right? Like I've made those choices, and I've been but they are the things that military families have to go through. You know, if you know a spouse, you know a brother, you know a sister, a mom or dad, give them a thank you, give them a hug, for even being associated so closely to somebody that served in the military. Because I promise you, their trial and their struggle is very real and very difficult.
Appreciate that. And you're coming to the end, guys, and we always, bring this back to family and Christ, and you're never alone. Even through the pains, they're unique to you, but there is one person that has felt them all, and that's our Savior. Luke, 100% appreciate you going over on this podcast, your experiences with us. Please, for those listening, like, subscribe, share, get Luke's story out. And, the algorithm, how it works, the more people do that, the more it will be shared. And the main thing is we want to make sure our veterans get all the help that they need as they have served us. Thanks, Luke. Hey, guys, thanks for clicking on the video. I appreciate it. If you could do me a favor, this video is all about our veterans. And whether you're in the military, thinking about joining the military, or you're out of the military, dealing with PTSD, or maybe you have recovered from it and is going through life. But I want to make sure you take the time, hit subscribe, because that helps out with the algorithm, pushes out to those other people that need to hear this video. Thank you, guys. Let's get to it.